Okay.
And there are banners here, not chairs. It's a regular school ordinarily.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's why I was so surprised. They were right, girl.
Next door to the park, they had a civic Rabbi Robin.
Oh, lovely. Oh, I see. Oh, I got it. Okay. Okay. We're going to start in 1 more minute. All right. It's going to be 9:15 in 1 more minute. Is that right? Sorry. אוקיי. תגידי מה, אני דיברתי אתמול עם אסתר, אמרתי לה שאני משחקת איתם לגמור עם דקות, יכול להיות שזה ימשיך עד 10 דקות.
כן, השיעור השני מתחיל ב10.
יש מספיק. אוקיי. בוקר טוב, good morning everybody. We are actually celebrating Yom Yerushalayim today. This afternoon will be the dancing, the marching with the flags in Yerushalayim in the afternoon, because this year it works out on Friday. When I turn the clock back, June 1967, I can picture myself. I was here in Israel. I had the zchut to be in Israel during the 6-Day War. I had come to Israel to study at Golda, and decided, well, that's a story in itself that perhaps will be for another time, but decided to remain in Israel despite the objections of my parents. I wasn't the only one that decided to remain in Israel during that very, very special time. But the highlight, no doubt, the highlight of the 6-Day War was on that Wednesday morning when we crowded around. We were a group of students at Golda, and we crowded inside a very tiny room, and there was a very old radio. There was a very old radio on the table, and we all tried to listen to hear what was being said. We were told that our soldiers had entered the old city, and within 2 minutes we heard Mota Gur saying very famously that very famous statement, "Ha habayit biyadenu," and we felt like dreamers. Hayinu kacholmim. And at that moment, another teacher came running in and brought a bottle of wine, and we wanted us to all drink the chaim together, which we did. But we were very keen to go outside because we had been in the air raid shelter basically for 2 days. And we rushed outside, and the convoys, tanks, and the army cars were coming back from the front, and they were throwing all over the sidewalks, the pavements, the streets, all kinds of souvenirs that they had picked up from wherever they were in the old city, which we grabbed, and joyfully created circles and began dancing and singing. And all of a sudden you could hear in the background Yerushalayim, the song Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, but everyone began singing, which had become basically an anthem, the second anthem, or very, very quickly it became a very, very famous song. So when I recall that, I can see this in my mind's eye as if this was mamash, as if it was yesterday. And for sure, this was something that this event, this time that I spent in Israel and volunteering and being involved in hospital and going into the hospital and volunteering, this had a very major impact on my life. And afterwards, I just did not want to go back to England, but for one reason or another, I had no choice. So I went back afterwards for just less than a year, and I made Aliyah in summer 1968. well, again, recalling the 6-Day War, we can't help to be totally awestruck by the magnitude of events that took place just over 56 years ago. Whether you call it a victory, or you call it divine intervention, or you call it divine providence, whatever you record to anyone who is not blinded by preconceived notions has to admit that what transpired then was of biblical proportions. You have a source sheet in front of you, and the topic that we're going to be learning is Yerushalayim touching eternity. Hanetzach zo Yerushalayim. The Talmud in source number 1 says the following: B'matnita Tana Mishmaya de Rabbi Akiva, Lecha Hashem Hagdula. When the verse says Lecha Hashem Hagdula, Zo Kriyat Yam Suf, it's referring to the crossing, the division of the sea, of the Red Sea. V'Hagbura, Zo Makat Bechorot. That is the slaying of the firstborn. V'Hatiferet, it refers to Matan Torah. Zo Matan Torah. V'Hanetzach, Zo Yerushalayim. V'Hahod, Zo Bet HaMikdash. So here he's giving us an explanation, an interpretation to each one of the expressions that's used to describe the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how his greatness is revealed in this world. And specifically regarding Yerushalayim, the description for Yerushalayim is Netzach. So the question is, what is Netzach? What does Netzach mean? When we talk about Yerushalayim being Netzach, what comes to our mind? So there are various translations into English, which I'd like to suggest. And I think that we'll begin by getting kind of a general picture of what Netzach is about. Living in Yerushalayim is living in a world of eternity. Netzach is eternity. Obviously, again, going a little deeper, what does that mean that we're living in a state of eternity? It means that being in Yerushalayim, and we'll bring in some the sources, and in order to confirm what I'm saying here, is to have a sense of Ein Sof, of something that just is no ending. There's something, the fact that for thousands of years, even though we were not living in Israel, Yerushalayim never left our lips. In all our prayers, in our Birkat HaMazon, we mention Yerushalayim. We have never really left Yerushalayim more than we were and have been in Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is in us, is in our being. Every wedding, the Chatan breaks a glass and says, "Im ishkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini." It's part of the very fiber of our being, being connected to Yerushalayim. One of the two Chagim of the year, Yom Kippur and Pesach. How do we end the Seder? We get up and we dance. Shana Habab Yerushalayim Habenuya. How do we end our Yom Kippur Tefillot after we've finished Hashem Hu Elokim, and he blows the shofar, and then everybody makes circles, at least where I daven. I'm sure that with you it's the same thing, and everybody dances and sings Yerushalayim, L'Shana Habab Yerushalayim Habenuya. So Netzach, when we talk about eternity, we talk about this like never-ending connection, deep connection that we have, that Am Yisrael have with Yerushalayim. Let us suggest another translation for Netzach. A conductor in Hebrew is menatzeach. Why is he called a menatzeach, a conductor? Because he has the ability to orchestrate, to create a harmony among all the musicians and all their kelim and all their instruments, and he's able to know when this particular musician should be playing a little faster and that one's a bit lower. In other words, he's in tune with all the complexities, all the different sounds, the different voices, and he's able to create harmony among all these different voices, all these different kelim. What comes to mind when I think of this is the verse in Tehillim, Yerushalayim habenuya ke'ir shechubra la yachdav, which means Jerusalem has been rebuilt, a city that unites, from the word chaver. And Chazal teach us that chaver, that Yerushalayim has the power, it has the ability, the spiritual ability to unite everybody. So this is also very similar, in other words, creating a harmony. We're able to harmonize here. We're able to connect here. We're able to accept differences and yet to be accepting of the differences, as the conductor is able to listen to the different kelim, the different instruments, and he's able to create harmony among all these instruments. We could put it another way, and we could say that it's infusing the world with eternal values, eternal values, as opposed to getting very excited about something and then it just fleets by. But if you want to really go into the depth and try to understand the meaning of Netzach, what does it mean? What's eternity? We need to enter the realm of Kabbalah. So bear with me, and I will give you some basic ideas that connect with Yerushalayim. When Hashem created the world, he began creating the world from the center of Yerushalayim. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Tzion is translated as Zion, but Tzion in Hebrew is a point. Hashem created the physical world from one point. So we find ourselves in a paradoxical situation. Of course, this is called, in Kabbalah, this is called Torat HaTzimtzum. Torat HaTzimtzum is gradually Hashem decreases his light in order to create a physical world. Because if Hashem were to enter the spiritual world without any what do you call them, like paragot, like screens in between, then we wouldn't be able to bear it. The world would not be able to come into being. And therefore, Kodesh Baruch Hu, as if to say, it's very paradoxical, and it's a Kabbalistic idea. He literally kind of narrowed himself down. And we find ourselves in that case in a paradoxical situation where we find ourselves in a place that has limits. Yerushalayim has limits. It has limits, although maybe it doesn't have limits, because there's a Gemara in Yevamot, for instance, that says in the future, Yerushalayim will reach the gates of Damascus. So that's like an interesting thought. And when we think of all the different neighborhoods that are being built around Yerushalayim, it shouldn't really surprise us that one day there'll be a halachic question whether we should be saying Tfilat HaDerech when we go up to Damascus. But anyway, we're not there yet. But we have found ourselves in a paradoxical situation where we are, as if to say, confined by a place, in a place that has limits, but spiritually enables us to transcend. A physical, transitory world becomes enclosed in eternity. Zeh Pella Gadol. It's a wonder. It's quite awesome. The following sources that we will be looking to now will confirm this idea. So if, for instance, we look at source number 10, which is on the second page, down below, it says the following. Esa Kedushot Hein. This is a Mishnah Masechet Kelim. Esa Kedushot Hein. Eretz Yisrael, there are 10 Kedushot, 10 kinds of holiness, 10 levels of holiness. Esa Kedushot Hein. Eretz Yisrael Mekudeshet Mikol Haratzot. Eretz Israel is holier than any other country in the world. Umahi kedushata, and what makes it holy? Shemevi'im mimena ha'omer v'habikurim u'shtei alechem. So he's giving an example that we bring certain sacrifices. Ma she'ein mevi'im ken mikol ha'artzot. You don't have to bring. There's no mitzvot of Trumot u'Masrot, or no, all the mitzvot that are the land is dependent. We are dependent on these. The land is dependent on these mitzvot, are not relevant anywhere else. And then he continues, and he says at the end of this Mishnah, you don't have a page. You don't have a source. Where are the source sheets? Source sheets? Okay. Who else doesn't have a page? Who else? Okay, so the end of the Mishnah, it says the following. Inside the walls, in other words, Yerushalayim, mekudash mehem, she'ochlim sham kodashim kalim u'maseh sheni, and then he continues and he says, Harabayit mekudash mimenu. So we have this idea that when we come to Eretz Israel, we are able to reach a higher level of kedusha. A person can learn Torah anywhere else, by the way, in the world, but one cannot compare Torah to Eretz Israel to the Torah learning anywhere else in the world. So if we have tremendous Talmidei Chachamim living in Chutz La'aretz, can you just imagine what level they would reach if they would be coming to Eretz Israel? Eretz Israel is a Makom Eretz HaKodesh, and the closer we get to the center, to the navel, or to the heart of the world, or to the eye of the world, the closer we get to it, the closer we get to the point where the world came into being, And in fact, all the nations of the world can feel this, and all the nations of the world know about this, and this is why there is a constant struggle over Yerushalayim, because they feel it, even though they may not admit it, they feel it and they know it. Let's look at another source on the first page, where the headline, where the title is on top, Hanetzach Zo Yerushalayim, and it's the second source Bet, and it says over there the following, but it's Bereshit Rabbah, and it's talking about, I'm first of all quoting not from here, I'm quoting from the Torah. It says in the Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man, he breathed into him, and he created him and made him into a speaking spirit. Man is referred to as a speaking spirit. What does the Midrash say? Rabbi Brachia v'Rabbi Chelbo b'Shem Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman amru. This is what they said. Mimakom kaparato nivra. He was created. Where was he created from? He was created from the place of the kapara. The place of the kapara. We all know what kapara is. The place of atonement. What is he referring to? Where it says, and first of all, he confirms that by bringing a verse from Shemot, Mizbach Adama Ta'aseli, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's the third line down. Harei ani boreh oto mimakom kaparato. I'm creating him from a place of where he can atone for his sins, which is what? Which is the place of the Bet HaMikdash. The Bet HaMikdash was built eventually on that very spot, on the place of the kapara. What is this trying to teach us? It's trying to teach something very, very profound. What is the magic of kapara? What is what is behind kapara? What's behind kapara is that we have the zechut, it's a gift. Hashem has given us a gift that when we do tshuva, we are able to change everything that happened in the past as if it never happened. Not only as if it never happened, but all our transgressions are transformed into zechuyot. Now, which is amazing. Now, how does that happen? It happens because the place of the kapara is a place that takes us above time and above place. So this is what I was referring to before. Yerushalayim is the city of Netzach, the city of eternity, because it takes us above place. It is the point of place that is ki'ilu, as if to say, limits us, but it doesn't limit us. We have the gift, we have the matana, that we're able to lift ourselves up and to raise ourselves above time and above place. Past, present, and future, they don't have a place. We are above that. If we turn back to the sources, the source above, it says in the Mishnah in Masechet Avot, says the following. Asara nisim na'asu la'avoteinu bebet hamikdash. 10 miracles were performed during the time of the Bet HaMikdash. And then he brings a list of examples. Lo hipi ela isha mirech basar hakodesh. A woman never ever had a miscarriage. The meat didn't smell. There were no flies in the Bet HaMikdash. And then there's an entire a list that if it rained, the fire of the didn't go out. And then it continues, and then it continues to give different examples of all the miracles that were performed, that took place during the time of the Bet HaMikdash. And in the last line of that paragraph, in darker print, it says the following: V'lo amar adam lechavero, sar li hamakom she'alid b'Yerushalayim. And when the pilgrims would come up to Yerushalayim during the time of the Chagim, of the festivals, nobody would say, "Oi, I can't move, it's crowded, I'm squashed, I have no room to move." How come? I mean, there were many, many people, because when we were literally elevated above the place, and therefore when you're elevated above the place, you don't feel like you're squashed. What I recall when I read this Mishnah is my own personal experience on the day of Shavuot 57 years ago. After we finished learning all night, we got up very, very early in the morning, and we were a group of 40 students, and our teacher, Rav Eliezer Eliner, a very tall man with very long fingers. I just recall it. I call that because I said to myself, wow, maybe Yoshua ben Nun looked like him. And I remember that he said to us, we are now going to daven at the place that our forefathers dreamt of, that our parents and our grandparents, who either did not survive or did survive and are not living anymore, did not merit, but they dreamed of coming here. We are now going to the place, to the kotel, to daven shacharit. And we ran outside and we made a long line, and we began dancing all the way to the kotel, all the way to Geula, up Rehov Strauss, down, all the way down, up Rehov King George, all the way. And in the meantime, more and more and more people were dancing. It was incredible. And I wrote home, I have one of these, I have the letters that I wrote home. I wrote home to my parents at the time, and I said, it's quite amazing that there are thousands of people, but it's so unbelievably organized that no one is pushing and it's not squashed, and that the police have arranged gates in between, like they would, let's say, 200 people dance down towards Kikat, down towards Hatzion, and then they would close off the gate, and then they would let another group go by, and there were thousands of people. We got to the Kotel, it was like, at that moment, I almost felt that the golden mask would be swallowed up on that place, and the temple, the Bet HaMikdash, would come down and it would take its place right over there. But sadly, that didn't happen. It didn't happen. The point where the world came into being, Yerushalayim Netzach, has the koach, the spiritual energy, to allow us, to enable us to fly above time and to fly above space. I think to make it even a little easier, I'll give you another example of when you love somebody very, very much. I'm thinking of when my mother, Zichron Livracha, wasn't well, and I lived like 15 minutes from her. But every day I would go over and see how she was doing. And it was a 15-minute walk, but it was like 3 minutes. It was like 4 minutes. Look, I left my house and I'm like running and jumping and running all the way to get to visit my mother to see how she was doing. It was like time wasn't time. I felt like I was lifted up above time. And this is the sense that we feel being in Yerushalayim. And another thing that I can share with you also on a very on a practical level, before I go back to these Kabbalistic ideas, is that many, many years ago, there weren't cell phones. So I travel a lot on buses. So when I travel on buses, right now I have one of these, my children insisted, so I have like a very, very small primitive phone. I can just like call and receive phone calls, but I don't have anything else with it. So, but then there were no phones. So you would be sitting on the bus, and by the time you'd get to the end of your journey, you would already be able to speak to the person that was sitting next to you, and where do you come from, and what do you do, and who are your family, and what are you doing, and you would know, like, they would be sharing with you, and you'd be sharing with them, and you would feel like you were part of something that was just extraordinary. And when I thought to myself, I would be thinking to myself that coming from London, when I used to travel on the tube, everybody was hiding behind their newspapers. So like nobody said shalom to anybody else, or even hello to anybody else. Sadly, today everybody is. I call these cell phones, I call them infusions. Everybody is attached to their infusion. But at one time, it was a little bit. It was different. We're going to look at now at source number 3. This is when Yaakov Avinu ran away from Lavan, not from Lavan, sorry, from Esav. It says, and he got to, it says, Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva. It's not written here in front of you. I'm just quoting the verses from the Torah. It's not in front of you. Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Harana. He goes out of Beersheva and he goes off to Haran. And he vayifka b'makom ki ba'a shemesh. And he finds himself in a place, kind of chances at a place, because it was dusk already. And he had a dream. Of course, you all remember the dream with the ladder and the angels going up and down, and Hashem promised to be with him. And then he wakes up from his dream and he says, and now we have the verse in front of us, verse 17. Look at source Gimel. Vayira, and he was afraid. Vayomar, ma nora hamakom hazeh. How fearful is this place? Ein zeh ki im bet Elokim, v'zeh shah hashamayim. This is no other than the house of God and the gate of heaven. This was the place, Hamakom. By the way, the place, Beit HaMikdash, Yerushalayim, is referred to in the Torah as Hamakom, the place, because the place where one can rise above the place. The Malbim has the following to say. The Malbim, underneath what we've just been reading, I'm not reading all the Malbim, it's very long. Vayira, and he feared, Yaakov feared. Al kain hityare me'od mikedushat hamakom. He feared the holiness. He was in awe. It wasn't a fear, pachad. In Hebrew, pachad is fear, but it was yirah, which is awe. He was awed by the holiness of the place. Va'amar, and he said, Ma nora hamakom hazeh. How awesome is this place? Umizeh yada, second line down. And from here he knew, Shahasulam romez gamken lemakom hamikdash, that the ladder is hinting to the place of the Bet Hamikdash. Now, if you go all the way down to the last line, at the bottom of that paragraph, you see the following. Aval, you have the place, everybody? The second word on the last line down. Aval, Sulam shel Yaakov, Shehu HaMikdash, the ladder of Yaakov, which is the place of the Mikdash, Shebo Noshkim Ara Verakia, land and sky, and land and sky, turn on the other side, Ahadadi, together, Yitnaheg al Yedei Malachei Hashem Ushluchav Hashkachiyim, Shehem Olim Tchila al Yedei Maaseh Ha'avodah Hanaasa Babayit Hanivchar. He's describing the avodah of the malachim, of the angels, in the Bet HaMikdash. But the line that I take from this long paragraph is the following: that the experience, the spiritual experience that he felt when he was there in that place was the experience of an embrace, as if to say, between the Creator and between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a feeling of intimacy. What a kiss, a place of a kiss. A kiss is meant to be, not what we know today, where everyone goes, hi, 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 wum, wum, wum. That's not a kiss. That's a stam. A kiss, an ishika, is an expression of a bonding beyond the limits of words. When we have said everything that we have wished to say and explained everything that we've wished to explain, and we have created a relationship which is for netzach, for eternity, a commitment, then there will be a kiss. Yishakeni b'neshikot pihu, ki tovim dodecha miyayin. That's how Shir Hashirim begins. Kiss me with like the kiss of a chatan to a kala. For your kisses are sweeter than wine. In his very compelling sermon, which no doubt you are all familiar with, I'm referring to the sermon of Rav Soloveitchik, which is called Kol Dodi Dofek. He gave the sermon at the 8th year of the independence of the state of Israel in the States, in one of the big yeshivot there. Rav Soloveitchik speaks of 6 instances where Hashem knocks at man's door and attempts to wake him up in order to fulfill his individual mission and his collective mission. There are moments where we're afforded an opportunity to redirect our course and to bring about profound changes, as if to say Hashem is knocking on our door. And the question is, when we hear the knocking on the door, the question is whether we decide to open the door, or we say, as we find in Shir HaShirim, when the lover knocks on the door, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knocks on the door to Knesset Yisrael, then the beloved, Knesset Yisrael, she says, oh, I've already put on my nightgown. I'm so tired. I don't really feel like getting up right now. Any koach? I got no koach. And then she catches herself and she says, well, this is crazy. I mean, here he is. He's knocking on the door. And she goes running downstairs and opens up the door, but he's gone. He's not there anymore. And these Rav Soloveitchik gives various examples of the state of Israel coming into being, and whether people decided at that time that now is the time to come to Eretz Yisrael, or he refers to the armies, how Hashem's the hashgacha over the armies. He brings different examples, but it goes for today as well. That today as well, we can hear HaKadosh Baruch Hu knocking at our door. Last week, I had over 20 people sleeping in my house last week because of what was going on in down south. I have 2 daughters that live in Sderot, and it was It was quite a big balagan. I felt like we were in a refugee camp. But in the aftermath, I'm thinking of the incredible miracles that hundreds of rockets fell here, and sadly, one person was killed. But compared to what was happening here, it's unbelievable. So obviously, this is a miracle, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asking us to open the door and to make changes in our lives, to do something, to and make changes in our lives. And this has to do with Netzach. If you spoke about coming back to Netzach, eternity, is the ability not to be caught up in the moment and to say, I need to go to sleep now, I'm not going to open the door. Or, yeah, I was invited to that wedding, but it's such a long way, and there'll be other people that will go anyway, so they'll make sameach, and and there's a good TV program on anyway, so why would I miss the TV program? Netzach is the ability to see our lives in the light of eternity. There are different examples in the Tanakh of moments, great moments, where they were either grabbed and there was a connection with eternity, or they were ignored, or they weren't taken advantage of. Let's put it like that. One example is the example of Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, who is referred to as Israel. Let's look at the text here with Yaakov Avinu. This is source number Daled. And I've just chosen one pasuk here. Okay. By Esav, it's referring in Parashat Vayishlach to the meeting between Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov had been in the home of Lavan for 20 years. He had married, he had a family, he had a large family, and he was now going back to Eretz Israel because he had not forgotten the Netzach. However, he prepared himself on 3 levels. Before he met Esav, he was very worried. It says in the Torah, Vayira Yaakov vayetzelo. He was very concerned that he wouldn't do harm to his brother, and he was also concerned for himself that his brother wouldn't harm him. One of the verses there in Vayishlach, I didn't bring with me a Tanakh, but we'll just look at this one verse here. Vayetzav otam leimor, and he commanded his messengers, saying the following: Ko tomrun la'adoni le'esav. Thus you should say to my master Esav, Ko amar avdecha Yaakov. Thus your servant Yaakov said, Im Lavan garti ve'echer ad ata. I lived with Lavan for a certain amount of time, and now I'm coming back ve'echer, and now I'm kind of late in coming back. Look what the Midrash says underneath. Ba'ota sha'a, at that moment when the messengers gave over the message of Yaakov, and the expression that's used more than once, 8 times, Avdecha, Adoni Avdecha, Ba'ota sha'a, Shekara Yaakov le'esav Adoni, that Yaakov called Esav my master. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem said to him, Ata hishpalta atzmacha? You degraded yourself? V'karata le'esav Adoni, and called Esav my master? Chet pa'amim? 8 times? Chayecha. I'm making an oath, Hashem says. Ani ma'amid mi banav shmona malachim kodem levanecha. Your children, your grandchildren, your generations will be challenged by 8 kings. Shene'emar ve'ele hamalachim asher malchu. And in the next source, the Zohar, we'll skip over the Aramaic and we'll read the English here. Once Yaakov saw Esav, Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. When he approached him, he began to bow and to prostrate himself before him, as it is written, and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Esau said, if he had so much power, he would not have bowed before me. He then began to become haughty again. The issue of the meeting between Jacob and Esau, it wasn't simply whether Yaakov would give him some gifts and he would be happy, but it was to have drastic implications for the rest of his history. This is what he's saying here. This is what's written here. You schmoozed up to your brother. You belittled yourself. You didn't stand before him. How do we say in the tefillah? La'amod komemiyut ba'artzecha, to stand in your land in dignity, not to make yourself little, not to justify yourself, not to constantly give explanations. We don't always have to give explanations to people why we do this or why do that. Why do we do that? How many times have we said to our children when they've said, why can't I go outside? How many times have I said to them, kacha, kacha, which in Hebrew means just like that. And they've learned that kacha is an answer. We don't always have to give explanations. We have to remember that we're the parents, we're the grandparents. We're not all in the same chabura, right? Like the kid will say, I'm not your friend. And I'll say, right, I'm not your friend, I'm your mother. And on a national level, we don't have to always explain when we decide politically, when we make decisions for our security situation, we make decisions. So coming back to here, to this source, at that moment when Yaakov, we say in Hebrew, he shpilet atzmo, he degraded himself, we paid for this for generations. This is what these sources are teaching us. According to opinions in Chazal, of course, there are other opinions as well. I had a discussion with my husband about this, and he's less extreme than I am. So he said, oh, sometimes we have to, what's the word in English? Levater. Sometimes we have to withdraw, you have to go back. And I say to him, no, not in this case. Not in this case. Yaakov, according to the opinions that I brought here, at that moment, he gave away the entire world, physical, material world, to Esau, leaving Western civilization as the primary power and developer of the world. What does Yaakov say? He says he needed time. And sometimes when there's an expression, avar zmano, avar korbano. In other words, if the time goes, you can't bring the korban, it's too late. You have to know how do we say, to take advantage of the moment, that the moment is critical. Like we're coming to that in one moment with Moshe Dayan and what happened after the 6-Day War. Because if we don't make a statement, if we don't act on a particular situation, if we don't act on it, then afterwards it's going to be too late. Well, maybe Bezrat Hashem, but hopefully and for sure, eventually Bezrat Hashem, when we say Har Habayit Biyadenu, that we really will mean that Har Habayit will be Biyadenu. He needed time. Sometimes we have to, not sometimes, but very often, when the time is there, the time is ripe, that moment, we have to immediately act on that moment. Otherwise, it'll be too late. And when we know how to take advantage of the moment, and we realize that we have to see that moment in the context of what is going to be in the future and what's going, in other words, yes, true. They did have a beautiful home in Golda's Green. Oh yes, they lived in the suburbs. It was very, very comfortable, but they were Ezu Chacham, who is a wise person who sees could see in the future, but knowing that there will, and if there isn't now a little bit, there will be anti-Semitism. anti-Semitism is definitely on the increase. So there are moments that when we're able to see the moment in the context of eternity, that we've rectified eternity. I'm going to give you another example in the Tanakh of someone who rectified the Netzach. Source number 7, that's Zion. Okay, so it's Shmuel Aleph, Perek Tetvav. You all recall that Shmuel appointed Shaul king. And after Shaul was appointed king, he was commanded by Shmuel, who received the Nevuah from Hashem, to destroy Amalek. So you read before Purim, Amalek, to destroy Amalek. But then what happened? Shaul felt very sorry for Agag, for the king of Amalek, and then he also left a few animals alive. He was supposed to destroy, he was supposed to kill the entire Amalek, the king, the animals, everything, and he was not to destroy everything. But he did not fulfill the word Hashem. I'm reading the verses from on your page here. It's from Shmuel Aleph, but the main verse was missed out, so I will add it. Vayoma Shmuel al Shaul, and Shmuel said to Shaul, Lo ashuv imach, I will not go with you, I will not accompany you. Shaul begged Shmuel to accompany him. After he had told him that he had sinned, Shaul said, please accompany me. Why did he say, please accompany me? Because he felt kind of embarrassed that here Shmuel had come to rebuke him, and all the people would see this, that Shmuel has gone away, has just disappeared. So he said, I'm not going to come back with you. Lo ashu imach, ki ma'asta et dvar Hashem, for you have despised the word of Hashem. Vayimascha Hashem miyot melech al Yisrael. And Hashem has despised you and has taken away your privilege of being the king of Israel. Vayisov Shmuel lalechet. And Shmuel turned round to go. Vayachazek biknaf me'ilo. And he grabbed his coat. Who grabbed whose coat? Obviously, it seems that it was Shaul that grabbed Shmuel's coat because he didn't want him to leave him. Vayikara, and he tore it. Vayome elav Shmuel, and Shmuel said to him, Kara Hashem et mamlechot Yisrael mi'alecha. Hashem has torn the kingdom from you. Hayom, today. Unatana lere'echa hatov mimeka. And he's given it to your neighbor, your friend, or whoever. And the re'echa is a friend who is better than you. Wow. But the following verse, which I apologize, it didn't come out in print, is the following. And this is the most important verse. V'gam netzach Yisrael lo yishaker v'lo yinachem ki lo adamhu lihinachem, which I'll translate it literally and explain it. And why is this the key word, the key verse? Because we're talking about eternity. And here we have the word eternity. V'gam netzach Yisrael, and also the eternal one who is referring to is Hashem. Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. He does not lie. V'lo yinachem, and does not go back on his word. The word lenachem, when we use it today, it means to comfort. But in classical Hebrew, it's to go back on your word. V'lo yinachem ki lo adamhu lihinachem. Because he is not a human being that would go back on his word. This gives us a window into understanding eternity. Netzach Yisrael, Netzach eternity means not going back on your word. Eternity means It means perseverance. It means being able to see no end. We are meant to liken ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We can't reach Hashem, but we can liken ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Netzach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is eternity. And by avoiding lying, by different examples I've given in the shiur, by persevering, by seeing the situation in its entity and its entire context, we cling to the midah. We cling to the midah of netzach, of eternity.
That's where they named the Neely group from.
Sorry?
The Arisons named the Neely group because of that.
I beg your pardon.
In Zichron
Yaakov.
that spy ring
Yes.
is called the Neely group because of that pasuk. That's the
Nachon. I also have a sister-in-law called Nili, Netzach Yisrael Lo Yishaker. I have a granddaughter called Nili. We like the name. Netzach Yisrael Lo Yishaker. But I think there's another point here. This is something that I thought about this. Shaul was appointed king by Shmuel. And although Shmuel didn't really want to, he opposed a king. In the beginning of Shmuel, we learned this, at the beginning he opposed the idea of appointing a king. When he did accept the request of the people, he became, as if to say, the father of Shaul. He nurtured him, he loved him, he encouraged the people to accept him. He was involved with Shaul. In fact, when he appointed Shaul king, it says, and he kissed him. Whereas when he appoints David HaMelech king, he doesn't kiss David HaMelech. So when Hashem tells him that Shaul is not going to be a king anymore, he's devastated. How do I know that he's devastated? How do I know that? Because we have in the Pshat in Sefer Shmuel that when Hashem sent Shmuel to appoint David HaMelech king, he says to him beforehand, Ad matai ata mitabel? For how long are you going to be mourning for him? He was mourning for him. So we know that he was in pain. We know that he was upset. But the fact that he received the word of Hashem and there was something that he needed to do, there are things that we need to do that we don't like to do, that we don't want to do, but we know that we have to do this for one reason or another. And if we're able to lift ourselves above ourselves and to do what we know that we need to be doing and what we're supposed to be doing, and we lift ourselves above ourselves, then we're connecting to the Netzach. We're connecting to eternity. Perhaps the reward, Shmuel's reward for connecting with Netzach. Do you know when Shmuel's yortzeit is? Tomorrow. Shmuel Hanavi, his yortzeit is on Yom Yerushalayim. Now, that's quite mind-boggling. In other words, it seems as if Hashem is saying to him, you rectified eternity. So your reward will be that your yortzeit will be on a day that in the future will become Yom Yerushalayim, which is a day of Netzach. It's the day and a day of eternity, of identifying and connecting with eternity. And in fact, tomorrow, many, many people will be going to the kever of Shmuel Hanavi, which is right past Ramot, on the right-hand side, if you're coming from town, and they'll be saying Tehillim there. Shmuel Hanavi had a deep connection with Yerushalayim, not only because we see that he was, his yortzeit is on Yom Yerushalayim, but Shmuel and David, they don't meet very often. But on one instant, when they do meet, in Sefer Shmuel, we have a verse that says the following, Vayeshvu b'nayot, and they sat together in Nayot. And Chazal say, Nayot? Where is there a place called Nayot? And Chazal teach us Asku benayo shel olam. They were involved in the beauty of the world. And on that night, Shmuel sat down with David HaMelech and he taught him the entire architecture of the Bet HaMikdash. He taught him how the vessels need to be built, where they need to be placed, what material needs to be used. He taught him on that night more than any teacher, and than any teacher would teach a student for, I don't know what they say, then are 100 years or something like that. So from here we learn that Shmuel Hanavi rectified Netzach, rectified eternity, and because he rectified eternity, because he had the zechut to rectify, he took advantage of that moment. He received this gift of teaching David HaMelech the laws of the Bet HaMikdash, and his yahrzeit was on Yom Yerushalayim. There are many Tehillim that speak about the beauty of Yerushalayim, and I mean, many of these Tehillim are connected to the sons of Korach. Just one of them, we have a few psukim here, and verse in Chet. Lanatzech al hagitit livnei Korach mizmor. What do they say, the sons of Korach? Ma yedidot mishkanotecha. How friendly are your dwelling places? Hashem Tzvaot, O God of hosts, the Lord of hosts. In other words, they're praising Yerushalayim. The sons of Korach, the children of Korach, are praising Yerushalayim. Nichsapa v'gam talta nafshi. My heart yearns and desires lechatzrot Hashem, to be in the courtyards of Hashem. Libi ubasari yeranenu el chai. My heart and my flesh will sing in your praises. Gam tziporo matza'a bayit udro ken la. Birds found a home there. What is the connection between Netzach, eternity, Shmuel, who rectifies eternity, and the sons of Korach? How do the Israelis say, what's the connection? Maha connection, right? Maha connection. Maha kesher, but they use the word connection. What is the connection? Shmuel is from the tribe of Levi. He's a Levi, he's from the tribe of Levi. The sons of Korach, again, this could be an entire shiur in itself, but we'll just mention it briefly before we end this shiur. They opposed uniqueness. They opposed specialness. What did they say? We're all the Zalch and Azach, right? That's how we're saying it, the same thing. Everything is the Zalch and Azach. We're all the same. Everybody's human, everybody's the Seder. We're all in on this together. All the places in the world, fine. Everything is the same. Nothing is different. All people are the same. All places are the same. All time is the same. Everything is the same. All is the Zalch and Azach. Of course, this needs to be developed, this idea, but we don't, for lack of time, I'm just connecting one with the other. For the last moment when the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed up Korach and his chevra, it says that there was a place just above Gan Eden because they did tshuva, and they said, what did they say? Moshe emet, v'torato emet. They admitted to the uniqueness, that there is a concept of uniqueness of time, uniqueness of place, uniqueness of people, and therefore it's very appropriate that Shmuel from the Shevet Levi and the sons of Korach, they will be the ones who will elevate themselves, lift themselves up, and sing in praises of the Netzach, of the specialness of the eternity of Yerushalayim. I'd like to end with a personal story. When I came to Israel, Eretz Yisrael, when I made Aliyah in summer 1968, and I was a young girl, it turned out that I was going to be making Aliyah on Yud B'Av, on the 10th of Av. And the 10th of Av was a nidcha that year. In other words, I was fasting. Tisha B'Av was on Shabbat. Yud B'Av, we were fasting. So I asked a shaila whether I'm allowed to leave and to go to Eretz Yisrael and make Aliyah on Yud B'Av. I asked Rabbi Gelis, Zechet Tzadik Livracha. You know Rabbi. Do any of you, anyone else know Rabbi Gelis? Rabbi Gelis, very, very dear friends of ours. But he said the following. He said, the sin of the spies was that they spoke in a derogatory manner about Eretz Yisrael. And they said, we can't go. We can't go. And then it says in the Parshat Shalach Lecha, Vayivku balayla hahu, and they cried on that night. Rashi teaches us the night that they cried was Tisha B'Av. Hashem said, you cried for nothing, I'll give you something to cry for. And that date, all the years, terrible tragedies, the destruction of the temples and other tragedies happened to Am Yisrael. Rabbi Geris Zichron Livracha said the following, you're going to Eretz Yisrael on Tisha B'Av, on Yud B'Av, is a rectification, is a tikkun for Chet HaMeraglim, for the sin of the spies. So we have moments where we can connect to eternity. The question is whether we are keeping our eyes open, whether we are listening, and how we choose to act at that particular moment, so that afterwards we don't say, "Oy, I missed out." Toda rabba. Thank you.